Hey guys, Falcon197 here, and welcome to my first official vlog. For those of you following what I've been up to recently on my channel, you probably know that I just kickstarted my second official Let's Play, and I'm looking forward to bringing out more of that in due time. But for now, I thought I'd take a break and put together a commentary vlog tackling a subject that has become something of a hot button lately in FPS circles, and that would be the upcoming release of Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. As the next game in one of the most popular FPS franchises, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare has been the subject of a lot of scrutiny, both positive and negative, which is normal for a game with such a huge following. Now, there's a ton of points and counterpoints on both sides, but after a lot of careful deliberation, I have decided that I will not be buying Advanced Warfare, and I'm dedicating my first official vlog to explaining the reasons behind this choice in the hopes of generating more thought on the subject of what really makes a good FPS game. Over the years, I've taken gaming seriously as a hobby, and because I take it seriously, I perform all of my reviews with a fine-tooth comb that extends the benefit of the doubt wherever possible. On the macro level, my aim is to promote gaming, but also to promote good gaming. On the micro level, I hope to raise awareness on some of the economic factors that are lurking beneath the surface of the gaming market. These are things that typically avoid attention because, as gamers, the temptation is to focus more on the experience and let everything else take a number. But I intend to challenge some of you to consider the things I'm going to be talking about. If nothing else, it might prove useful in making a decision for whether or not to buy future games. But ultimately, I trust you as the viewer to take this information and do with it what you will. And that includes offering any counterpoints you think might be valid to answer my argument. I don't consider myself any kind of authority on this, and I have no wish to come across as one of those arrogant, all-knowing FPS veterans who thinks he has the final word on what makes a good game. I will, however, reserve the title of being an FPS veteran as a credential for what gives me the right and the reason to offer the kind of feedback I'm going to be giving. And again, I encourage you as the viewer to take and do with this as you will, since it's up to you how to best invest your time and money. So to start this discussion off, I'd like to spend a moment identifying my target audience as the group I hope will benefit most from my commentary. I'm directing most of my remarks and feedback to the community of players that composes the Call of Duty market across not just PC but console gamers as well. Although I'm a PC gamer, I like to think that console people have an equally vested interest in Advanced Warfare, and so this time I'll be addressing everyone in the COD market, into which there are 4 distinct subgroups, all of whom will take what I have to say differently. One of these groups in particular is going to receive a disclaimer before I get into the nuts and bolts of my arguments, so bear with me as I give a breakdown of groups in my target audience, and we'll take it from there. First up are the fanboys. Now, these are players who have been loyal fans of the COD franchise for most, if not all, of their gaming careers, but in a superficial, overly attached kind of way. People in this group would buy anything with a COD label on it and probably believe that the series can do no wrong. They buy all the DLC and probably don't have any thoughtful standards for measuring a game's quality or an appreciation of the economic factors in play with their purchases. Few will admit to being in this category, but the fanboys group fits the mold that Karl Marx famously wrote about, saying that they don't know what it is, but they are doing it. The next group in the lineup are average COD or FPS gamers. Now, this group includes players who don't assign loyalty to COD or any one series. They play a variety of shooters and are willing to give this a shot just because it looks half decent or because it seems new and exciting. They may be following their friends around or their clan because that's their obligation. They may be totally comfortable in this mode, and there's nothing wrong with that. I believe even the worst games are better with friends, and as someone who fits into this category, I'll be offering my remarks framed mostly from this perspective. Next up is the group who are newest to the COD universe and perhaps to FPS gaming in general. Most of the gamers in the newcomers category are open-minded and impressionable, and they stand to gain the most from hearing the brand of criticism I'm about to unload because it's good to receive exposure to perspectives that take into account the good, the bad, and the ugly of a series, or else run the risk of being pulled aboard the fanboy wagon. Lastly, we have a contingent of gamers who fall into the miscellaneous or independent categories. Some like COD, some want to like it. Some think this one might finally get it right, and some are working hard to craft their own decision tree and want to hear more in the way of objective review before making a decision. Some may play all kinds of games and are just taking a pot shot at Advanced Warfare, or maybe they have extra money to spend and don't really care. No matter the case, they should be all ears for this too. Now then, here's my disclaimer. What I have to say in this vlog is not, I repeat, is not directed at people in the fanboys category, and there's good reason behind that. The way I see it, trying to convince anyone in this group to not buy Advanced Warfare would be like trying to play the role of the escaped prisoner in Plato's allegory of the cave. Because face it, fanboys, you're living pretty contentedly in your cave, and no one who tries to convince you to leave will be met with anything but spite, or perhaps energy drink-fueled resistance. And so, rather than waste time trying to talk sense to a conglomerate made up of mostly preteens who enjoy immersing themselves in M-rated games and keeping headset manufacturers in business by overloading their mics with online rage, I'm going to focus more of my points at the latter categories of players. Alright, so here are the three areas I'll be exploring in my discussion. Number one is the story. This area covers the game's settings, theme, plot, and feel, as well as delving into aspects of the single player based off what is known about the game, and also drawn in comparison to other games with similar or higher stature. Number two is the gameplay. This area covers the deeper aspect of the product design, such as the engine, balances, general feel, and the kinds of things we can all look forward to while playing. I'm also focusing more on the multiplayer side of things here because multi is where this analysis can be best applied. Number three is experience. This last element is meant as more of a summary, drawing everything together into a larger scope and offering some final perspectives and other points that don't really fit into the previous categories. At first glance, Advanced Warfare doesn't feel natural, either to Call of Duty or even as a standalone universe, because people are used to things that make logical sense. After looking through the story trailers for Advanced Warfare, we find that there's no historical or real-life basis for the plot, which itself appears to be a blend of Terminator, Black Ops, and Atlas Shrugged. But more importantly, there's almost a sense like the developers just arbitrarily yanked in anything that looked good, or pulled out elements of already successful series. A good example of this would be the popular comments that some of the gameplay looks exactly like Titanfall, just without the Titans. Now, in retort, people I know have said that the theory behind using a sci-fi premise is parallel to the kinds of things you'd find in games like Halo or Crysis, both of which did exceptionally well in their own rights. But my answer will be, number one, at this point I think we've got enough games that center around sci-fi, and it isn't a bad thing to have developers try and focus on creating the more familiar, gritty, modern warfare-themed shooter, rather than taking an easy out by going with a sci-fi theme. And number two, the familiar, gritty, Modern Warfare-themed shooter is something that Call of Duty has excelled at. COD 4 was an outstanding game for its time, and while the rest of the Modern Warfare series had its share of shortcomings, one thing it didn't fail to deliver on was the natural feel of the story, by way of the setting or the time frame. The same was true in Ghosts. But with Advanced Warfare, it seems like COD is embracing a heavier version of the Black Ops style, near-future setting, with more of an emphasis on sci-fi or experimental weapons, that in turn detracts from the premium stock the franchise has run with until now. While we're on the subject of the story, I'd like to take just a minute to address those among you who might be campaign-only buyers, people who just buy the game for the single-player experience. Now, I'm someone who's sympathetic to this point of view because I typically buy real-time strategy games and sometimes first-person shooter or other tactical warfare games primarily to play the single player. I think this is a totally legitimate position to be in. However, there are two things to worry about with Advanced Warfare that I would say aren't as much of an issue in other cases. First, this is Call of Duty, meaning it's a big-name game series and it has a marketing department tasked with monitoring a colossal chunk of today's video gamers and to try to cater to their interests with the marketing. In addition to this, they also monitor sales of every COD release, and therein lies the danger, because seeing the usual droves of people go out to buy this, simply because it has the COD label on it, will serve as an easy prompt for its marketers to give the game developers a green light to do more of what they did before. Unless, of course, a sizable chunk of the market doesn't buy the product. Secondly, and indirectly related to this, there are other smaller name developers who will take note of Advanced Warfare's performance on the market. It's often said that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but in the commercial world, imitation is an attempt to rake in profits by emulating whatever has proven successful. You won't hear about this much, but there are a lot of FPS game development companies watching to see what will happen with Advanced Warfare, and a bunch of them will probably focus more on the success as defined by the profits that Advanced Warfare generates, versus how good the actual game was. Now keep this in mind as we get into discussing more of what's wrong with Advanced Warfare as a product, because one way or another, buying it will guarantee that you see more products like it, both from Call of Duty's developers and other FPS game makers. Also, on a side note of the story, I've seen far too many people getting hyped for Advanced Warfare simply because it features Kevin Spacey as one of the main antagonists. This strikes me as shocking because, while I have nothing against Kevin Spacey or the quality of his acting, I find it difficult to get behind something just because a famous actor is being used to promote it. A good way of measuring this is to ask yourself if you'd still be as interested in the game if its trailers hadn't featured Kevin Spacey. To be honest, my first thought after seeing the reveal for Advanced Warfare was to burst out laughing, and the reason for that is because it looked as if the developers had gone all out to reinvigorate their audience by bringing in someone iconic like Spacey to fill a leading role. Something else to consider with this is what kind of role Spacey would actually play, since it seems like his character, as the head of a large international PMC and a main antagonist, would by definition, from a storyboard standpoint, only appear in cutscenes or passively throughout the game. Using what knowledge I have on typical campaign lengths and storyboarding, I'd estimate we'll maybe see about 30 minutes of him in Advanced Warfare overall. So if it's Kevin Spacey you want, go watch House of Cards, because each episode is an hour long, and you'll get more of him that way than by hopping on Advanced Warfare and becoming a victim of cheap marketing tactics like you'd find in Mad Men. So make your money count for more than just a dash of Kevin Spacey. Alright, we're moving into the gameplay discussion now, and the first thing I'd like to talk about is the fact that Advanced Warfare upsets the balance of traditional FPS. Futuristic FPS is not FPS, and once again we find the counter-argument that classic top-tier FPS titles like Halo do the same thing Advanced Warfare does with its superhuman-style gameplay. But I'd rate that as false, because games like Halo have a track record for blending in sci-fi elements without shortchanging on the classic FPS feel. And so while you might have things like superhuman strength or agility, the implementation of these comes second to a gameplay system that isn't so different from what you'd find in, say, Counter-Strike or an older Call of Duty. A classic first-person shooter is centered around the concept of old-school run-and-gun, not flying through the air, not seeing through walls, and letting the tech do all the fighting for you. I think it's safe to assume that since Advanced Warfare equips players with the kind of movement system that it does, it'll lead to a downturn in the classic FPS gameplay seen in Call of Duty previously. So expect a tougher time with assault playstyles, and if you're more of a sniper or quickscoper, I pity the position you'll be in to try and hit targets that are constantly maneuvering through the air. But even if the superhuman brand of gameplay in Advanced Warfare appeals to you or your playstyle, there are still plenty of things you'll want to take into consideration. For one, unlike previous Call of Duties, Advanced Warfare's gameplay seems to cater more to noobs, or a newbie style of gameplay. If the fact that all players can bunny hop 2 stories into the air continuously isn't enough for you, maybe consider the fact that the developers are planning to bring back things like 3-lane map design, which overwhelmingly provides an advantage for more of the arcadish style of FPS, while taking away from a tactical experience you'd find in games with asymmetric map design. Personally, I'm not a fan of 3-lane maps because while I can appreciate the occasional arcade-style FPS experience, I found that having it become the norm is, in a word, boring, because it limits the types of gameplay you'll engage in. Another way of thinking about it is like playing a game of musical chairs with guns, because whoever controls one or more of the lanes in a 3-lane map will ultimately dominate, and any players who are tactically minded are forced to engage in a chaotic melee for the same choke points over and over again. Back when the beta for the new Medal of Honor came out, people were constantly complaining about the multiplayer map design because the developers saw fit to only put 1 or 2 lanes into their maps, and the resulting gameplay saw groups of players from each team bunching up and camping out with snipers and other heavy weapons, waiting for the enemy to poke a limb out. Games in that kind of environment usually result in a tug-of-war that hinges more on luck than skill, because invariably, players will take advantage of the fact that their opponents will always be in the same areas consistently. Advanced Warfare seems to be predicated on a design theory that adopts this premise, and therefore it caters more to the noobish rather than the tactical kind of FPS experience. Now, let's shift from map design and talk about equipment. There are reports among the types of equipment available in Advanced Warfare that we can expect to see anti-personnel mines that stick to any surface and actually track players around corners with a smart homing explosive. In his in-depth review video over Advanced Warfare's debut at Gamescom, Drifter made mention of the fact that he saw people master these devices by placing them on the blind side of ledges, so unsuspecting players would boost jump onto them and then be caught in midair without any way to escape. And since boost jumping is one of the new hallmark features in Advanced Warfare's multiplayer, it's safe to assume that this kind of tactic will be used a lot by anyone looking to score easy kills. But surely there's a counter to this, right? Well, based on current info, I don't have any way to confirm whether or not there will be viable counters in the way of perks like sitrep or any kind of exosuit armor, or even some kind of tool to let players hack explosives and turn them against other players. Right now, the only thing we know for certain is that these smart charges are in Advanced Warfare and that players will be able to use the same kind of scrub tactics seen in the Modern Warfare series with claymores or in Ghosts with IEDs, but on 3-lane style maps with boost jumping while using weapons that have a very fast time to kill. And did I mention that Danger Close will be back too? Can hardly wait. So this new brand of advanced combat will open the door to all kinds of exploits. But worst of all, as a PC gamer, I don't want to imagine what hackers or modders will do with some of the things in Advanced Warfare. I know that on consoles this isn't an issue, but here again, I'm addressing people on all platforms. Now, the fact that Advanced Warfare caters to noobs comes second to the fact that it also steals the thunder from tactical players. And what I mean by that is based partly on the flip side of what I just explained a moment ago about how the game caters to noobs, because by giving one group an edge, you necessarily put others at a disadvantage. But you can tell that the developer's sense of balance is out the window when you hear that tactical things like dead silence aren't in the game, or that crutch perks like toughness are back. So on one hand, we can expect to see that some loadout elements will immediately be rated as mandatory in order to have a decent setup. In the case of toughness, we have dramatic flinch reduction. But in addition to this, if it's true that dead silence won't be included in Advanced Warfare, then I'd expect to see sound whoring become more mainstream, since no one will be able to move quietly to execute objectives or avoid detection in the process of stacking up kills. And as a player who focuses heavily on stealth, I find it a pretty lame prospect that the developers are doing things that negatively impact styles like mine, while also giving more of an advantage to players who do bunny hops or like rigging up explosive traps. Although, while this qualifies in the annoying category rather than being a deal breaker on its own, the next point I want to toss out there adds some extra kick to the cons in Advanced Warfare. And this is actually something that I got from hearing Drifter's commentary on the Advanced Warfare debut at Gamescom, and I laud him for taking the time to follow up on it to the extent that he did. As has been shown in more recent trailers for Advanced Warfare, players will have the opportunity to gain weapon and equipment unlocks through what's called supply drops, which are awarded based off of a player's performance and contain random, yes, random sets of unlocks. What this means is that the days of earning specific pieces of equipment through completing specific challenges or earning certain ranks to gain unlocks are gone. But what's truly disturbing about it is the fact that it seems frighteningly similar to the kind of play-to-win system we see in shooters that monetize unlocks. This is especially the case with a lot of free-to-play FPS titles. From my own experience, most of the FTP shooters I racked hours on were great games, until they decided to adopt a play-to-win mantra, either by blocking out certain unlocks to be available to people with pay-to-earn in-game currency, or else installing a kind of dualistic system that still allowed regular players to unlock stuff, but it gave deep discounts to those with money to spend. The result in either case was a massive gap between the haves and have-nots, and a consequently huge difference in game experience for each group. Having been in both, I can tell you it's very one-sided. But tying this back to Advanced Warfare, if we look at the supply drop system and examine the premise behind it, the only thing separating it from a monetized system is literally a handful of people who have the authority to make that kind of a decision, to monetize. So I stand in complete agreement with Drifter that Call of Duty is getting dangerously close to a slippery slope with this move on supply drops, and a very effective way of sending a message to the developers is to not buy the game. Alright, now let's move on to discuss Advanced Warfare's engine. Unfortunately, the engine is yet another iteration of the same old thing. No matter how upgraded or gutted and redone the developers claim the latest Call of Duty build is, the simple fact is that it still will probably suffer from the same kinds of drawbacks seen in other COD games, meaning either it'll lag or have major optimization issues for some people. The effects of this will especially be felt by PC gamers though, because COD products are ported to PC from console. This is done because console is where they get most of their revenue from, and ergo they would have more incentive to ensure maximum optimization by building it for consoles first. But even if you buy Advanced Warfare for console, I'd wager that the usual assortment of lag and frame rate issues will still apply, to say nothing of the difference in graphical fidelity that has been proven time and time again between PC and console, but that's a debate for another day. Pursuant to the fact that Advanced Warfare is on the same old engine is the reality that its developers are making mountains out of molehills with their latest creation. This is arguably the cheapest brand of insult that devs could make from a design standpoint. Here's why. Consider that instead of investing time to integrate things like a more dynamic global physics system, such as what you'd find in games like Battlefield, or implementing better mechanics that allow for more tactical gameplay and tap into the powers of the engine, think of stuff like door breaching, kill-op coast streaks, or God forbid, vehicular combat. Instead of any of that, the developers' latest achievement here with Advanced Warfare is to go into their engine and change the gravity variables so that players can double jump. Based on what I know about game design from my own experience, I can tell you that the same thing can be done in CryEngine by making 1 or 2 flow graphs, and that one experienced person could set up the exact same kind of jump system in about 30 minutes to an hour. So anything that Advanced Warfare's devs are saying about their gameplay being groundbreaking or uniquely crafted as a design element should be regarded as an outright lie, because it's so easy to do. One more beef I have with the design of this game is that their new tech in gameplay, like physics or levolution as it's advertised, it really isn't as advertised. What we learned from Ghost is that most of the levolutions will probably consist of cute tricks with preset scripting that have nowhere near the kind of randomness or quality or scale that they could if more effort was devoted to them. The worst part is that Call of Duty's devs have the tools to implement something more dynamic, but not the desire to, and that says something we should all take note of. Alright, as we move into the third area, talking about the kind of experience that Advanced Warfare brings, there are a few points that I'd like to hit in no particular order that just sort of round out the discussion on what is wrong with Advanced Warfare. And first off is the fact that AW falls into the pit trap that more and more games are now, where it's introducing players to the everyone deserves a trophy mentality with regard to skill building. And that's because the new gameplay mechanics and unlock systems in Advanced Warfare ensures that no one has to all-out work anymore in order to build skills in the same way as you would on a traditional shooter. Second to this, we have the new but also retreaded superhuman gameplay that goes outside the norms for first-person shooters. And this touches on one of the biggest issues I have with Advanced Warfare, and that's they've made it clear a significant percentage of the combat will be centered on jump mechanics. For something like Titanfall, that's perfectly fine. But here's a newsflash for you, this ain't Titanfall. My point, look how often jump mechanics are used in the gameplay footage here. Half the kills in the trailers we've seen so far were death from above type deals, and all of them were based on this canned buzzword that devs are starting to use, verticality. Really? There's vertical elements in combat and level design, sure, but last I checked, FPS isn't supposed to be played like it's on a trampoline. Third on the line is something that has received quite a lot of hate from not just the Call of Duty community, but from the gaming community in general, and that's the fact that Advanced Warfare will give its developers the chance to roll out more bogus DLC money trains in the wake of release. And of course, they've already started with the pay us more for stuff on release day pre-ordering racket, all this Day Zero stuff that you see on Steam and elsewhere. Gamescom and everybody else doing it. I know other series do this crap, but few do it to the level that Call of Duty does. They did way better when they gave DLC content out for free to those players who stuck around long enough, faithfully waiting for it. But, sadly, gone are the days of World at War, save for those few who recall them. Lastly, there's the matter of the community making the huge mistake that too many people do by assuming that just because there have been drastic changes introduced, that those changes are automatically good. In the case of Advanced Warfare, this assumption comes after the release of the debut trailer, which, by the way, was edited by the devs exclusively for promotional purposes and heavily screened by marketing in order to determine that people would find it to be attention-grabbing. Want a good example of how different the final product can be? Go back and watch trailers to the Black Ops games. Or better yet, if you're an RTS fan, go watch the trailer for Command & Conquer 4, and then go watch the cutscenes and gameplay from it. You might be wondering why I'm bringing up CNC4 or what possible relevance it would even have to this discussion, but my reason for mentioning it is because it's a good example of how first-rate video game series can go down the tubes because of bad faith on the part of the developers. So, bottom line, big changes do not equal good ones. So overall, in short, I'm not willing to hand my money to anyone who thinks that all they need to make a good game is modded physics and a hyped-up engine. Based on everything I have seen so far, I think Advanced Warfare is nothing more than a poorly designed, last-ditch effort to create a swell in interest, because the more I look around, the more I see proof that Call of Duty is starting to lose its position as king of the FPS market. Not to any one franchise, but to all of them. People are growing tired of being taken advantage of by a group of developers who promise time and time and time again to bring out the next best FPS, but ultimately only give us a half-baked product at best, while also trying to milk the market continuously with their DLC, and it's done in a way that doesn't bode well for their customers. Based on what Advanced Warfare is showing us with its design, I think that post-release we can expect to see quite a few people abandon this series. In conclusion to all of this, let me backtrack to the beginning by saying that I take gaming seriously as a hobby, and because I take it seriously, I perform all of my reviews with a fine-tooth comb, and try to extend the benefit of the doubt wherever I can, while maintaining as much loyalty as possible to those series that have proven themselves through the course of time. Here, I'm doing the same kind of careful review with that same fine-tooth comb, and unfortunately, I'm getting almost nothing in the way of positive calories in looking at Advanced Warfare. Therefore, I don't plan on buying it, and I recommend that anyone who finds merit in anything I've said to reconsider their position if they're leaning towards buying it. At the very least, it wouldn't hurt to wait until after Advanced Warfare's release so that more conclusions can be drawn from the community at large. After all, I do think that the proof is ultimately in the product. Okay, so in summary, I'll attempt to tie off a few loose ends. With the bulk of my discussion done, I figure I'll take a moment to address a few counterpoints I expect some people will have in response to what I've said here. I'd prefer to address them in advance rather than spark flame wars in the comments. Some of you, after watching this vlog, might respond by saying, "You're just a COD hater." First of all, I've been a fan of Call of Duty since COD 2, and I've played every title except for COD 3 and Big Red 1, and that was because they were on console only. To date, the only Call of Duty I would go so far as to say I didn't like was Black Ops 2, but that was for a number of different reasons, and I still ended up purchasing the game and enjoyed playing the campaign, even though multiplayer was terrible. Advanced Warfare will be the first COD I don't plan on buying. You're just another critic. Anyone who says this to me is always amusing because I normally don't affiliate with the critics, for good reason. I think too many critics invest too much time and too much effort being critical without offering any real insights, and so I would hate to be counted among their rank and file. I consider myself an independent thinker, and it takes a lot to get me to come out and force against something. The last game I wrote a scathing review of was Command & Conquer 4, and that was because EA did something unforgivable by taking one of the greatest RTS series of all time and turning it into a complete joke. Other than that, I've kept an open mind about most games, including big-name titles, and I've been keen to give the benefit of the doubt from a consumer perspective. You have no respect for what it takes to make a game or a good game. Okay, I actually take offense to anyone who accuses me of this, and it's because as someone who spent 3 years working to learn level design on the CryEngine, I have immense respect for what goes into quality game making. There are so many elements that make up the stuff that we play and get mad at when it's not perfect or doesn't work perfectly. I get appalled when people trash talk developers for selling them short or not caring about their products. The proof is ultimately in the product, as I said before, and I think it's uncommon to find games that are actually cheaply made, especially by big names like COD. However, I am also wary of the fact that big-name developers have more recently aligned their goals with profit interests rather than the will of the consumer. And for all the reasons I mentioned in this vlog, I think the developers of Advanced Warfare are doing too much wrong to make me think that they actually care about their consumers. The last time I saw this kind of thing was with CNC4, where the devs promised dramatic changes that the community would love. What we actually got was a steaming pile of dog shit. You're still a fanboy hater. Yes, I am, and proudly so, because adopting the fanboy mentality means that you're perfectly willing to sacrifice reason in exchange for an experience that runs more on hype than on substance. And last I checked, crackheads think the same way. You don't really think your opinion will make much of a difference, do you? Honestly, no. My goal through this whole video has been simply to offer my opinion out to the following that I have, and perhaps see it shared with others in order to provoke more thought. Fame wasn't the goal here, and it never will be. So I'll take whatever returns I get from a receptive audience. And I still won't buy Advanced Warfare unless I'm proven wrong. You seem awfully overconfident. What if you're wrong? I'm prepared to leave about a 10% void of potential that Advanced Warfare will actually be a decent title, but there's no way I'm getting it on release day or through pre-order, and I plan on thoroughly sifting the reviews when it comes out. In any event, I plan on issuing a complete reversal of anything that's proven wrong in a future vlog, and I'll gladly let anyone hold me to that. And if I'm in fact wrong in sum total, I might end up buying Advanced Warfare after all. If we don't buy Advanced Warfare, what else should we play? What do you recommend? That's something I'm still working on. Believe me when I say that my commentary on this issue is anything but convenient, because I realize that I'll be missing out in some way by not buying Advanced Warfare. However, one opportunity I do believe comes out of this is to have gamers explore the market more thoroughly and discover new and exciting games. On PC, we have the luxury of a dynamic indie game development market on Steam. For console, well, that's another story, but you guys have plenty of things we don't, and if nothing else, you owe it to yourself to get some added value out of that by going back to the basics with older titles and getting a reminder of what good FPS feels like. That's more of a blessing than a curse in my book. That's partly why I'm doing Let's Plays on classic shooters as much as newer ones, because I don't think the value of games should expire just because new stuff comes along. There's plenty to get out of what's already there, especially if you make it a social activity with people you know. So, we finally reached the end. Hopefully I didn't put anyone to sleep with my monologue, but this was a complicated issue on its face, so tackling it wasn't easy, but I think I touched on everything I wanted to in one way or another. If anyone has something to add, by all means feel free to do so in the comments. I look forward to reading reasonable inputs and deleting anyone who tries to start flame wars, so just don't fire from the hip. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, stand by for more. Falcon out.